Today I wanted to do an April wrap up of all my April reading and my studying. So April, it's been a bit of I would say a mixed bag, to be honest. One of the things that I would go back and change if I could is the amount of focus I gave to the tag Picture This, which is a tag that ran through last month based around picture books. So I started the month off strong with Picture This, and I read a John Classon book, The Skull. This is the first John Classon I ever read, and I loved it. I really loved it. I talked about this in my 24-hour readathon, which I did right at the start of April. For me, the thing that I loved about this is kind of the unspoken in here. The fact that this girl runs away and it doesn't speak about what she's running away from. The book starts on the very first page with the lines, "One night, in the middle of the night, while everyone else was asleep, Attila finally ran away." So that word finally, I've said about this before, it puts a lot into the story there. We know that Attila is really running from something, and she finds this house, she makes friends with this skull. For me, there was a very found family theme to this. There was a theme of running and hiding from things that you should belong to, but you don't. And as the black sheep of the family, as a family scapegoat, I got this idea of hiding and isolating from things that you should belong to. For me, reading with an adult perspective into this picture book, that's what I found, and it really touched me. I loved it. And then in a charity shop, I also found this book, The Wolf, the Duck and the Mouse, illustrated this time by John Classon, but written by Mac Barnett. And you've got the wolf eating the duck and the mouse, and what should be an absolute tragedy for them. This story charts their ability to turn something very dark and bleak into home, into found family, into wild revels. Again, it just hit me with a similar theme, so that was a fabulous way to start April. But I kind of am a bit regretful because I've got some other wonderful picture books that I just didn't have time to get to. I will carry on, I think, possibly this month if I've got time, to do those picture book videos that I wanted to do but I didn't get to in April. But sometimes single moms and single momming responsibilities and Easter holidays, it doesn't see you filming YouTube videos, but I am incredibly grateful for the picture book tag for introducing me to John Classon. I loved these. And then as part of that 24-hour readathon as well, I read Sybil Leek's Diary of a Witch, which I just thought was fantastic. So Sybil Leek, a real life character, based down in the New Forest, a really famous English witch from a very well-to-do family, actually, from a family that had got contacts with Aleister Crowley. So it's a really interesting tale about generational witchcraft. Sybil spent a lot of her time not in traditional school. She was taught by her grandmother, who was a witch, and from other family members. Her father had a rich history in occultism and was friends with a lot of famous occultists. Sybil talks about being taught like herbalism and how to connect with nature from one aunt, how to summon animals and talk to animals and to work with animal energy from her grandmother, who had a pet crow. Sybil had a pet jackdaw as well. We also see in later life her move away from her family to live with the travelling community and the gypsies, and all the lessons that she learnt with them. And then her move to America to be more in the limelight, really. She was televised quite a bit. She was involved in ghost hunting as well. I think my dog, Luna, do you want to go out, darling? My dog wants to go out. So really interesting in the fact that she was such a staunch advocate for witching being good for the good of the world and not being called into the dark occult side of witchcraft. In fact, she's quite critical of Aleister Crowley in this book for the directions and the decisions he made within his witchcraft practice and his occult practice. I think that one of the lovely things that she says near the beginning book is in talking generally about the different branches of witchcraft. She says, sometimes the traveller may be diverted to a point of feeling lost, but in my personal experience, I have found that no matter what path is taken, we all have one destination, truth. And in seeking out that destination, we have drawn nearer by the fine thread which is our link with the deity. I loved that. Really interesting when she's still friends with Crowley as a young girl. She talks about working with poetry with Crowley and going on walks with him over the local hills, and him teaching her about the power of words. She says, Crowley told me that words were important in witchcraft, but not only for their meaning. It was the sound that mattered, as each sound set up a vibration. In witchcraft and in the Indian mantras, words are often replaced by strange sounds, which to the uninitiated seem meaningless, but undoubtedly help to raise the psychic forces and often induce a state of trance. Aleister Crowley will always be the poet mountaineer to me. And I was shocked in later life to read in newspapers that this remarkable man was called the most evil man in the world, and that his name was never mentioned in so-called nice societies. So I think she leans more towards an understanding towards the end of the book of why that might be. She just was disappointed in some of his choices because she had that connection with him as a young girl of this incredible man that she would walk the hillsides with and be taught all about poetry. So that link to literature and poetry and the power of words, just a lovely story of a life if you are interested in paganism, pagan ways or witchcraft. And then as part of that 24-hour readathon as well, I got to some Amanda Lovelace poetry. The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one. So I would say this is quite easy poetry to read. It's I'm not a great poetry reader. I'm quite new to reading poetry. I kind of feel a little bit of imposter syndrome saying anything about poetry. I have that gosh, I don't know what good poetry is hat on for certain, but I enjoyed it, and I think we can only go on what we enjoy. So this is very much a collection of poems based on empowering the wild woman or the witch. It kind of is summed up by poems like this called Women Libraries About to Burst. They scratched it out of the history books, but on all the great innovations you will find scorch marks in the shape of a woman's magnificent handprint. Do not forget, we need to be the history books now. So just things like that. Some short poems, some longer poems, but I really did enjoy this. And I know that Amanda Lovelace has other books in this series. It's called The Women Are Some Kind of Magic series. There is book number 1 is The Princess Saves Herself in this one. This is book number 2, The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one. And for those of you who are interested in a slight crossover of interests, Amanda Lovelace also has some pretty fabulous decks. She's got a tarot deck out called the Cozy Witch Tarot, and she has an oracle deck called Believe in Your Own Magic. Both of these decks are firm favourites of mine. I use this tarot deck actually an awful lot, Let me just show you a couple of cards so you can get a feel of what they're like. So we've got backs like this. If you are interested in tarot or oracle, but you like your tarot and oracle to be diverse in lots of different ways, then Amanda Lovelace's decks are great for that. You've got skin colour, you've got body shape diversity, there's disability represented as well, and I've loved using these decks. I think this was probably one of my most used decks of 2024, and I really loved it. Also great for a beginner because you've got a sentence actually on the card to help you with meanings. So Amanda Lovelace, quite a force to be reckoned with creatively, I would say. So I'm going to talk about my library book reading next. So I took out of the library at the start of April the book Raising Hair, which has just been shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction. Unfortunately, with other things going on, I left this right to the end of my 3 weeks with it to attempt to read it, and I ran out of time, and there's such a massive wait list on this book with it being shortlisted that I couldn't renew the book, having waited something like 3 months to get it. So I'd read a half of this book and had to return it, and I really didn't enjoy doing that. But the half I've read, I loved it. I'm going to put it back on wait again at the library to try and finish it off at some point. Very gentle, very warm writing about a woman that finds a leveret, a baby hare, out in the wild. When she returns back a few hours later, it's still there right in the middle of a path where it could be stepped on or a dog could get it. So she decides to take it home, and it just charts her trying to raise this leveret without it becoming a pet, without it becoming too dependent on her. It charts all her research, all her trials and errors, and it's just very warm. It's very warm and homespun and wonderful. It kind of transports you right into the middle of her garden to sit and watch this hare in the sunshine. It just felt warm and cozy and lovely. Halfway through it, had to return it. What a shame. And also another one from the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction. I had this book on audiobook, What the Wild Sea Can Be. I've listened to about half of this. It's a great book if you're interested in the oceans. So far I'm finding it just a little bit too academic, of like different aspects about the oceans. I don't know about the second half, whether it's going to be more about envisaging like keeping the ocean healthy or making it healthy again and what we could do about it. I hope so, but I've kind of been stalling with this one, if I'm honest. So those were my library reads. I'm going to talk about my study now. So I said on my TBR video that I really wanted to prioritise some study around sort of literary criticism or literary theory. I started with this one, Peter Barry, Beginning Theory, an introduction to literary and cultural theory. So I am just under halfway through this now, and I'm fine with that. I'm taking this nice and slowly. So I've studied liberal humanism, structuralism, post-structuralism and deconstruction, postmodernism, psychoanalytic criticism, and I'm halfway through reading about feminist criticism at the moment. It's got easier the more I've read it. I did think, gosh, is this beyond me? Because the second chapter on structuralism, I reread it 4 times. It just wouldn't sink in what it was meaning, and I don't very often have that with books. I can read something and not be interested in it, but to read something and feel like I don't understand it, that's quite a new experience. And it did see me pulling other literary theory books off my shelf and just trying to tune in on structuralism, and I just was getting more and more confused and more bored, to be honest, because I've been reading this all month and I'm only that far through it. So I decided to completely come at it from a different approach and just to accept that this is a hard subject, this is a new subject. It's okay to just read it through and only say get 20% of what it's meaning, and that on the reread, to trust the reread of the book, that I'll understand more, and then on the third reread I'll understand more as I'm putting in other books. So this is definitely, I think, a book that you are going to have to just accept it's going to be more than one read if you're completely new to this subject, as I am. When I did change my strategy with this one, and I just decided to just accept what I don't understand and just keep reading, and just to trust that some of it will stick, it began to get a lot easier. I don't know whether it's just because I changed my mindset, or whether just those first couple of chapters are really difficult, because post-structuralism, so much easier to read. By the time I got to postmodernism, I thought, yeah, I'm getting this. So I don't quite know whether it's just structuralism is particularly hard. Like I say, I'm new to this. On the reread I'll probably know. So I think any study, I've heard people say that about Shakespeare as well. I know that Tristan over at Tristan and the Classics, he says when you're first approaching Shakespeare to try not to study it in depth, just to read it the first time, just to read it and let it flow over you. And if there are chunks that you don't understand, just go with it and you will get some of it. It's like throwing mud at a wall, really. Some of it will stick. And it really did work for me with this, just to go with the flow. And I think listening to Kate over at Kate's Corner as well, talking about her study, she talked about the power of the reread as well in one of her videos. I can't remember which one. So that's just been an interesting shift in my mindset and the way I'm coming at the harder topics of my self-study in literature. So what's my plan moving forward? The plan is to add no more extra books in at the moment. I'm just going to keep focusing on this. I'm just going to carry on the same strategy of that first read through. I'd like to get this finished this month. But yeah, go me, I got halfway through a difficult book. So also reading challenges, there's the Candy reading challenge, which is my reading challenge. April's prompt, of course, was April showers. So to read a book that's something to do with weather, or got weather in the theme, or something to do with weather on the cover or in the title. So one of those books that were on my pile of possibilities I did get to. This is Ali Smith's Spring. So it was picked because of the lovely spring cover and that idea of the seasons rolling around bringing different weather. It is part of a quartet. You can see autumn and winter pictured on the back. There's also a summer book. When I first started reading this book, it was so different. Ali Smith, I've never read her before, and I wasn't expecting her to play with language quite as much as she does. But once I got over the initial shock and carried on reading, the themes of this book just came out slowly and beautifully and really in creative ways. It's a book that's thematic very much around the idea of belonging and of borders. It's kind of set between the border of England and Scotland. There's even borders with her work. She works as a guard in a detention centre for immigrants who are being processed. So that idea of coming into the country and being an immigrant and where you belong, very much a book about borders and belonging. And there is kind of a magical realism aspect in this as well. There is a strange girl that appears and we don't quite know what her powers might be or might not be. It kind of slowly weaves its magic in really unexpected ways. I did not expect this book to tell the story that it did, and it kept me guessing all the way through, and it has stayed with me. I really love this book the longer I think about it. Very, very interested to read summer. When I get to summer, I'm going to try and find that book secondhand. I did find this book secondhand, and also really interested to read some more of her work. She just felt like a unique voice. She does play with not only typeset but just words and language in a way that was really unexpected for me, and I did really enjoy it. The main book that I focused on all through April, and this is the last book that I read in April, was my Victorian reading, Charles Dickens' Bleak House. So this is quite a chunker, so this is where all of my focus went really in April. I didn't want to rush it, I didn't want to read anything alongside it, hence the fact that I've not got loads of books read. I just wanted to focus in on this, and I thoroughly and utterly loved it. It had a big act to follow after reading David Copperfield at the start of the year, and I also knew I wanted to get this read just in 1 month. I wonder whether it could possibly live up to the standard that David Copperfield had set, because I loved David Copperfield so much. But you know what, it really, really does. I thought it was fantastic. Slightly different to David Copperfield in its use of language. David Copperfield is all first person, and because of that I think David Copperfield is really easy to read, because you're very anchored and grounded in the voice of David Copperfield, because it's all written in first person. So there are loads of different characters and plots and subplots coming into play, but you're always rooted in that book, in the voice of David. This book has like a duality aspect to it. Some of the book is written in first person through the voice of Esther Summerson, and you get whole chapters that are just titled Esther's narrative, but then it crosses to kind of a blind narrator. You don't know who's speaking, it's like the book's voice in a past tense, looking at lots of different characters and talking about the plot and the characters as an onlooker, and that kind of threw me to start with until I realised what was happening. I kind of got a third of the way through and the tense changed, and it just really grated. So I got used to that. I loved it. I think because of that it's slightly harder read, though it's not a difficult read, but it was a slightly harder read than David Copperfield, because there are so many characters coming in, and there's so many plots, and there's so many storylines interweaving, and you like revisit different characters later, and you've got no one voice to ground you in all of that. There's not one viewpoint, there's different viewpoints because of the different tenses, but it just takes some getting used to. And of course Charles Dickens does his magic, and he manages to weave everything back together to the point where everything is making sense towards the end of the book. I loved the gothic elements in this. If you wanted to find a Dickens gothic novel, then this has got prophecy, it's got ghost footsteps, it's got ghostly happenings in here. I loved that idea of the ghost walk and the prophecy, and characters in the book realising they're part of the prophecy. I loved all of that. There was mystery and intrigue in here as well as a really interesting view on the Victorian legal system, because the whole book is set around a inheritance case of jaundice and what being embroiled in an ongoing, long protracted court case can do to people, how it can change people and embitter people and basically make people poor. And that was a really interesting take as well. Also on the respectability of women and how women were viewed in Victorian times, and how devastating it was for a woman to lose her reputation, and how really there was no coming back from that. And a fantastic and very sharp criticism by Dickens as well on the nature of charity, and how the poor are ignored by the upper classes or the middle classes that will very happily take part in charity work for far off exotic causes, and that idea of the foreigner in Victorian England, and yet they will literally watch the poor die on the street in front of them. Very, very sharp social criticism in here again, which was really fascinating. There are some beautiful love stories. There's unrequited love, there's tragic love in here as well. I loved Mr. Jarndyce in here. I just thought he was just gorgeous. Esther, even though she's very self-deprecating, I loved her. There's the amazing character of Lady Dedlock as well. Just Dickens does characters like just nobody else, and it's worth the effort. Again, it is a big book, but it's so worth the effort. I loved it. Easy 5-star again. So Dickens just is not letting me down at the moment. For the Read Good challenge over at Ben's channel, April's prompt was to read a book that had been nominated for the Women's Prize for Fiction. So I had got Hamnet on my TBR for last month, which I just did not get to. Spending time with Bleak House just took most of the month, as you can imagine. I don't regret that at all. It was just it's the only way to read it, just to give your all to a Dickens novel. So I didn't get to Hamnet, so I'm currently reading Hamnet at the moment, which is downstairs at the moment. Gosh, I'm loving it. I'm loving it because I know the places and I know the houses. I spend a lot of time in the Shakespeare houses. Like I said, I drive past Anne Hathaway's cottage 4 times a day at the moment, and I've got passes for all the houses. I will go and just read in Shakespeare's garden regularly. I go and pull tarot cards in Anne Hathaway's garden regularly. So as this story is unfolding and we're going from one house to the other, I know the rooms, I know the windows that they're talking about, and I know the streets that these houses look out onto. So I'm finding that just surreal and fabulous. But it's going to be a May read. I just didn't get to this one in April, and I'm fine with that. So that's it, guys. There were some super challenging reads on here, including, I want to put Ali Smith on there as a challenging read because it was so different. There were some disappointments with not doing quite as big and as good a job as I wanted to with the picture books, but again, just blown away by Victorian literature and Dickens. So this was like the highlight really for my April reading. So how did you get on? This is your turn now to tell me in the comment section about the books you read for whatever challenge you're doing or any mood reading you're doing. If you did my prompt of April showers as well, you will have already told me what books you were trying to get to. Did you get to them? Did you read them? Did you enjoy them? Let me know. And May, gosh, we're in Gate May now. That's exciting. Where is this year going? So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for spending some time with me as I chat about the books that I read. Have a great reading May. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.